Hello and welcome to another video. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to make Grimy Jungle in the style of samurai breaks and napes, inspired by their tracks Wavelord Bizniz, Violins, and Correct Technique. The project file, samples, and presets are available for a small contribution in the description, along with some bonus Serum 2 presets. Please like and subscribe if you find the video informative, and if you have any suggestions for artists you'd like me to cover in future, please comment below. Our BPM is 170 and we're in the key of B minor. I've chosen a distorted kick sample inspired by Wavelord Bizniz. I'm using drum bus and a limiter to compress the dynamics. Although if you're starting with a cleaner sample, you'll probably want to use heavier saturation. You could also use a breakbeat kick as samurai breaks and napes do in Correct Technique, or a combination of a break kick and an 808 as they do in violent violins. Then we have the breaks. We have the Sesame break for the bulk of the loop, followed by an aim and fill at the end. I've used saturation on both of these, plus GClip to crush the dynamics even more. You might have started to notice a bit of a theme here. I'm using heavy distortion to create these grimy jungle breaks. I've also added some noise to the aim and fill using erosion. The stretch snare at the end of the fill was originally made using Infiltrator. And I'll put the settings on the screen. You could try using Live's texture algorithm and half speeding a sample, but I found that plugins like Infiltrator and Effectrix yield better results. I cover more break processing techniques using Infiltrator in one of my Sully videos, which I'll link below. Next, we have the claps. The first clap is layered with the Sesame break, and the second is a fill. The main clap adds more of a crack to the break. I often layer claps with break snares for emphasis, but the way samurai breaks and napes do it in Wavelord Bizniz, with the claps more audible in the mix, showcases their grime influences. You could of course say the same about the fill. And finally we have the high perks. We have a couple of hats. And a couple of tambourines. Let's listen to what the loop sounds like without these. These high percussion elements are crucial for filling out the frequency spectrum and giving breakbeat drums a modern feel. I've mildly applied this two-step groove to all the tracks in the drums group, apart from the kick, and this helps the drums feel more human and less mechanical. On the no kick group, I've applied saturation, and reverb via send day. Let's listen to the reverb soloed for the whole mix. Here I'm using the MC Club preset. Samurai breaks and napes tend to use short reverbs at very low levels or no reverbs at all, similarly to how reverb is used in classic grime. On the drums group, we have EQ. None of the reference tracks have particularly subby kicks, and this is influenced by jungle, where most of the sub comes from the bass, and that's why I've used this high pass curve to remove some of the sub frequencies. Next, there's OTT style compression to fatten and brighten. Saturation, another EQ, and more GClip. And finally, wider, since the drums in Wavelord Bizniz are fairly wide. If you'd like to see how I make a very similar style of drums from scratch, check out my 140 breaks video. Next, we have the basses. Let's start with the warper. We have this add seconds waveform in oscillator A, with its wavetable position being modulated by LFO1, which is on envelope mode. This is routed to filter 1, which also has its cutoff modulated by LFO1. You notice that for all the patches, both the sub oscillator and oscillator A have been taken down by 2 octaves. I've done some Serum 2 specific routing with this patch and a couple of the others, and I'd recommend watching my recent Deep Warper Serum 2 video for an overview of this technique with more in-depth explanations. Here, filter 1 is being routed to bus 2, but remember to select none from the drop-down menu. If we go to the effects, there's distortion and chorus, and then we have a frequency splitter, and here I'm splitting the frequencies at 100 Hz, and then a utility to mute these frequencies below 100 Hz, and that's because the lowest frequencies are being generated by the sub oscillator, which is being routed to bus 1. For bus 1, we have a compressor and a splitter with the same crossover, and this time the highs are being muted. Don't forget to enable monophonic for your basses. Then we have Warper 2. This is similar to the previous bass, but our LFO shape and rate are different. For a faster acting LFO, creating a staccato feel. We've also used a slightly different filter. And we've used an EQ to thin out the mid-range. There's no chorus this time either. The rest of the routing and bus 1 setup are more or less the same as the previous patch, but I've added some glide in the voicing tab. Next, we have the sub. This follows the lead, and this technique is heard in Wavelord Bizniz. This is a sine wave, routed to some distortion and compression. I spent some time tweaking the decay and curve of the amp envelope to emulate the lead. Next we have the wobble. We have the same routing setup as the warpers. Oscillator A is a square wave, again taken down by 2 octaves, going into filter 1, which is this low pass filter, with its cutoff modulated by LFO1. I notice LFO rates changing mid-sound for bass and effects a few times in the reference tracks. This is not a particularly common technique in bass music production, and it makes patches feel like they're speeding up or slowing down, but in a rhythmic way, which I think is really interesting. To do this, I've modulated LFO1's rate using LFO2, which you can see more easily in the matrix. Then we have LFO3 modulating the filters cutoff and the master tuning, creating a pitch drop. In the effects for Buss 2, there's distortion, EQ boosting highs, and chorus, followed by a splitter and a utility, turning down the sub-frequencies. The sub-oscillator and Buss 1 are very similar to the first 2 patches. And for Buss 1, there's a compressor and a splitter, plus a utility, turning down the high band. Finally, I used an 808 underneath the aim and break for that classic jungle feel. On the group, I've boosted mids and highs and compressed the subs for consistency. There's saturation, parallel compression, and a rack with the kick sidechaining the sub frequencies so the kick and bass don't mask one another. Reverb is applied via A. Next we have the vocals and effects. Starting with these 2 noise effects. Noise 2 has echo and a long reverb applied. I heard similar noisy impact effects in Correct Technique, and these are great for adding emphasis to the start of a section. We have these 2 Raz Kitchen vocals, and I'll link his free pack in the description. I've added OTT, and notably a couple of echoes with different settings. I've automated the echoes to turn off at the end of the loop, and that's because of the Vox tail. I'm doing this so that we have some vocal tail at the beginning of the loop, but you don't necessarily need to bounce it to audio. I've automated a high pass auto filter on the vocal track. And I've added some extra echo and gain automation to increase the tail's duration. On the group, there's saturation, parallel compression, EQ, chorus, and reverb via A. Finally, we have the grime leads. Here I've emulated Wavelord Bizniz with large melodic leaps, followed by stepwise notes that are mostly ascending. It's pretty common in bass music for a lead sound to be inspired by a bass, and that's what we have here. Both oscillators A and B are at seconds, with their wavetables modulated by LFO1. Oscillator B has been taken down by an octave and turned down a little. Both oscillators are running into filter 1, along with some white noise, with the filters cut off modulated by LFO 1. The amp envelope shape, with its long release, was the only way I could get the right shape for the sounds, although the length of the MIDI notes also plays a role. In the effects, there's downsample distortion, a common type of digital distortion heard in grime, and an EQ, which is effectively removing frequencies from oscillator B. Oscillator B's role is to give the sound a bit more fullness. As you could probably hear, the fundamental is missing due to the EQ. Then we have more distortion, chorus, slappy 16-note delay, and a short reverb. This is the vibe I got from the lead in Wavelord Bizniz, which feels quite dry, but there seems to be some kind of processing to add flavour. Again, this is typical of early grime, where the tools producers had were more limited than modern day DAWs. And that's the video. Please leave any questions in the comments, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.